Do you all agree your brain determines who you are? My brain determines who I am. Her brain determines her. His brain determines him. Isn't it the forced and unforced verbal inputs, visual clues, repeated failures with follow-on minimal successes, and the experiential behavior associated with strong emotions make us what we are today? Or is it passion that has been driving us all? Passion has become a common fancy word in our society. To me, passion is a myth and a mystery. Understanding one's passion is more difficult than tracing the root word of word passion. First use of word passion was in 13th century, originating from a Latin word passio, meaning suffer or endure. In the present societal scenario, searching for one's passion, understanding it, and to reach it is very complicated. As we are surrounded with diverse real life situations, giving us a feeling of awe, happiness, joy, and comfort. Desires kick in majority of the time, mimicking passion, and confuses the choice one needs to make. Pursuing passion and sustaining it goes beyond hands for many of us in the disguise of desire. I, as a teenager, was fascinated by the classes of my science teacher, Ms. Padma. To a ninth class student, teaching about a part of brain is extremely difficult, especially maintaining the same level of enthusiasm. Carla pora quadrigemina, medulla appulam In the local lingo, these two fascinating ways of teaching about corpora quadrigemina and medulla oblongata, two vital structures in the brainstem, began my desire towards neurological sciences. The attraction towards brain and its functions well. Not being a routine topper at the school, I toiled and burnt the midnight lamp during my teenagers. My desires were appearing imminent. I entered the prestigious Madras Medical College and Government General Hospital. Immense legacy of the institution from the contributions of Professor V. Ramurthy and the roots of Dr. Jacob Chandy cultured the desire within me to pursue further to understand the brain and its functions. Remember, those were the days where one in every third patient who were operated for a brain surgery died. But these young men in their late 20s and 30s stood with courage, determination, and optimism. Quoting the words of 28-year-old assistant surgeon, Dr. Ramamurthy, returning from abroad, there was jealousy, there was prejudice against a young person, there was a communal virus, there was a sheer cussedness. But acknowledgement, kindness, and appreciation from many of the others overcome these. Similarly, in his 30s, Professor Dr. Chandy, not a professor then, Dr. Chandy, with his stature and credibility, convinced the Vice Chancellor of Madras University to start a MS neurosurgical training program in India. These two young, dynamic, and determined men led the path for super specialty training and academics in India. Acknowledging all these legacies of the institution, the arduous training at Madras Medical College consolidated the innate desires within me about the brain surgery, to know further about its functions and the pathologies and the surgical implications. As a surgical intern in a government general hospital, I've seen neurosurgeons walking in and out of the emergencies very frequently under the odd hours when other specialists are not being called, especially most of them run sleepless. The two things which really kicked me in and made me realize was, one, rapid assessment, and second thing was immediate response. These two things save lives. I was fortunate and I stepped into Christian Medical College, Vellore, the mecca of Indian neurosurgery, exactly 10 years ago in 2013. Ownership, commitment, dedication. These three things were essential and become an integral part of training from day one. Days had no beginning, night had no ending. Food and sleep were a luxury. Neurosurgery was a way of life. Neurosurgery was a way of life. N1 ward was the male ward, N2 ward was the female ward and associated small chamber for the pediatric patients. Those are filled with patients who are at the verge of death without any surgical intervention. The moments my eyelid drooped, there was someone who lost consciousness. My pocket diaries had no ends. For every one task I completed, there were 4 new tasks that I was piling up. Most of my first surgeries, which I learned from my seniors, were during the odd hours in the night or at the peak of my fatigue. Ability to think during the crisis, ability to identify the disaster just before the verge of collapse, attention to details were breathed in and out of outpatient clinics, wards, postoperative zones, operation theaters of neurosurgery at Vellore. Training myself and training the new junior residents entering into the program was a way of life. Every day was different. Every patient was different. Only one thing was common. All these patients would die if they are not operated. Dr. Vedantam Rajshekhar, Dr. Ariji Chako, Dr. Matthew Joseph spent their lives from their black ash to the grayish silvers. Ensure the legacy retained and expanded. Beginning young and taking ownership was the mantra. During the residency period, the cerebrovascular pathologies, one that deals with the brain blood vessels, was very complex and was very difficult for me to comprehend. At the same time, there was a dire need for a dually trained neurosurgeon in the country. There was no structured, accredited training program for neuroendovascular procedures for neurosurgeon in India. The desire to know the complexity and the intricate details of the cerebrovascular pathologies and to test the waters of the scary pathology grew within me. I was shortlisted as one of the only non-European into an endovascular program. I landed up in a foreign country, in Italy, with no pay, empty brains about the upcoming field, and just with curiosity. I was welcomed by the Professor Cristaudo and his team. They took ownership of me. They ensured the time I spent there was something valuable which I could take back for the goodness of all at home. Ownership of an unknown. Ownership of an unknown. Hard to accept the void. Willingness to train with involvement. Readiness to teach was exhibited by Professor Cristaudo and a couple of my friends, Dr. Marco and Mario. Paved a new way of life. It was a transition from a 75,000 RPM diamond drills, which is operated at a 30x magnification at the depth of 250 millimeters, trying to remove a 6 centimeter tumor through a 3 centimeter hole using a 3 millimeter tip, which is oscillating at a 23,000 cycles per second, to arena where you puncture at 1.2 millimeters in your thigh, trying to control the brain, which is 150 centimeters far, using a 1.5 millimeter catheter, using the substances which is made from the periodic table called as stents, coils, and embolization materials. It was a completely different. But the strategies of having plan A, plan B, plan C, preparedness to handle the untowards event, delicate movements of the fingers, never change, the same as the conventional neurosurgery. Clarity and clearness was the prime core crux of the entire process. There was a complete transition of time zone from light years to eons. Margin of error to death was in millimeters and milliseconds. Every second was feeling like a 10 hours. Every 1 degree of rotation was feeling like a 360 degree. Every 1 millimeter movement was feeling like 1,000 kilometers. It was different. Geared up with all these experiences, I came back, landed in Chennai in 2021. In 2021, ICMR published a data saying 40 to 43% of patients with stroke die. There is a case fatality rate of stroke is around 43 to 45%. And the incidence of stroke is around 33 to 123 per 100,000 population. The challenges were completely different. Prior to implementation of my highly refined skills, what actually required was to make the field viable for these skills to survive and then to thrive. And being associated with the startup medical college, the entry barriers are extremely high. The astute leadership from the founder and the visionary made every adversity into an opportunity. None of the people in the place knew what neurosurgery was. Know it, visualize it, rehearse it, do it was implemented as a strategy to train the young nurses and the technicians who never had any exposure. We had mock sessions which helped to reveal the ignorance in a very polite way, increase the situational awareness of the people who are involved, vocalize it, check it, ensure it. These were implemented at the level of execution by these nurses. The previous strategy was implemented when we had no patients, very few patients landed up. The second time when we had patients, we need to do it. What was more important was, what were we doing when we didn't have patients? And what were we doing when we had patients? We didn't have patients, what we're doing when we had patients. Training the staffs made an impact. We had a reassessment at every 45 days to see how is their competency level to handle this set of complex patients. This created a reluctance, fear, and panic among the nurses and the staffs, as well as the people who are working in other departments. There was no new nurse, there was no new technician who wants to join neurosurgery. This was a setback. But the team who was undergoing these sessions and the strategy implementation gained the confidence. Then I started sending those patients who visited my post-operative clinics to go greet the nurses in the ICU. This gave more confidence. The nurses came up, promoted other nurses to join the team, pushed their working hours. This made an impact. They could really see what they were actually doing for the patients inside the ICU. Some were comatose, some were arrogant, some were not having senses of what they're doing, some were completely normal inside the ICU. But when they came back and greeted them, it gave a feeling of completeness that built the confidence. We moved from admitting patients who had small injuries in the brain due to trauma, progressively progressed to 60, 70 cases now, including advanced brain surgeries, where we operate and stimulate the part of the brain to know whether the hands are moving, legs are moving, and to have 12 hours, 13 hours of operating time. Mere presence made an impact. These were not big surgeries which made an impact. Those are small, what the community lacked and they needed. Simple things, that's what mattered a lot. Complex things just fell in place. My desires and experience since my teenage has led to this path, which I believe is rare in 140 crore people of our country. The life of Professor Ramurthy, Dr. Jacob Chandy, Dr. Vedantam Rajshekhar, Dr. Ariji Chakko, Dr. Matthew Joseph unveils. It is okay to have desires. It is okay to think big. It is okay to start with nothing. It is okay to do simple things. It is all okay to be ensure resilience, perseveration, determination with passion. It is all okay to be young and then to lead. Thank you.